Should you bet the long shots for the Kentucky Derby? Find out as we have another edition of Trust the Profits, Fact or Fiction. Trust the Profits, it's the formula here. We're going to be talking a little bit of fact versus fiction for the Kentucky Derby, betting the long shots. And this came out of a comment that somebody posted on our last fact versus fiction, where we talked about betting the favorite and how you could have a reasonable ROI if you did that consistently during the 2000s. This person said, hey, look at the payout. If you bet on every 50 to 1 shot at post time since 2000, you'd be up several thousand%. So I decided to dig into this. A lot of the data was laid out there, but I had to add a couple more things in. First, let's go through the common thoughts here in terms of betting the long shot. So, long shot horses win all the time. Just something you hear people say. Is it true or not? We're going to find out in a second. The chalk doesn't win enough or often enough to make it worth your while. So a lot of people, especially all the sharps, the horse players, they don't like betting the chalk. They want to find the value. They want to find the ones that are going to be giving them some big swings here. And then if you look at the last four Derby winners, the two I have highlighted, this is the list that I took from my last video. Rich Strike was 81 to 1 when he went off in 2022. That's a great payout. Country House was 65 to 1, sorry, when he went off in 2019. Both of those were morning line favorites of 30 to 1. So again, we're going to be talking about going through horses not like Forte, not like Kingsbarns, or if he was running Logan. No, we're going to be talking more about like horses such as Lord Miles, for example, right? Betting those types of horses for the Kentucky Derby, which before it happens seems pretty crazy to think that, okay, one of these horses, Sun Thunder, could win. But let's see, does it happen? Is James N correct here? So going back to the slide that I think kicked this off for him, and I combined a couple things here. You can see where I pointed out on the left-hand chart that there's your modest ROI there, 20% ROI over 23 years, and hitting 7 times in that timeline. So you're hitting roughly 30% of the time and you're getting a modest ROI back. But of course, if you shift to the right on both charts here, you can see that there's huge red bars showing that the ROI is in fact greater in some of those long shots, right? Stands to reason. Now, granted, these charts were incomplete for making that point. It was easy to point that out, so I wanted to dig in deeper. When you look at a morning line, there's usually only one favorite. I mean, when you look at it initially, there's one favorite. There was one exception in the 2000s where we had two morning line favorites, and that's because one of the horses scratched. So the two that were second line, second ranked morning line favorites moved up to one, and there was a tie there. So when you look at this chart on the left, it really is geared towards taking a look at the morning line favorite. If you look at the ones later, you're going to have multiple horses tied for different rankings within that split there. Post time, that's a little different because post time you get so much movement in there, you get the fractions, so you can really rank out the horses there. So what he's saying is, I want that, the big chunks of ROI on the left, and then I want that on the right hand chart, the big ones at the very end there. So what does the data say? I looked at it three different ways. So first, always betting the morning line least favorite. Not exactly what he said, not exactly what James said here, but I took a look at it. What if you bet the horses that were tied for that worst morning line every single year? And what you have here is three winners. Feast or famine, right? Three winners. They're all above $100 ROI wise. You have to bet 80 horses at 50 to 1 through all those years. And then there was one exception. One year you would have to bet the 30 to 1 horses because there were no 51 shots in 2022. So you would actually pull in Rich Strike because of that if you simply went 50 to 1 like he was saying for the post time favorites. But anyway, I wanted to make sure that the spirit was caught here. It does show that you would get a positive ROI. That rolling ROI from year to year starts off dipping down, and then with that first win in 2005, Giacomo dips up, starts to dip down a little bit more, but still positive. And then with Mind That Bird shoots back up to where the ROI is at 100. And then for many years gets chipped away by all those bets that first place horse was winning in a number of those years in the 2010s. But then finally with Rich Strike shoots back up to where he's almost at $200 over, he being the fictitious better here. So one thing to note, Country House was a 30 to 1 in the year where he won in 2019. So the fact that he's not counted here is because Gray Magician, expert fencer, I believe his name was. I could have that wrong. I forgot to double check that name. They would have counted for the two bets in 2019. So that's why we only have the three wins here. So that's one way to look at it. The next way to look at it is always betting the last post time horse. And clustering in post time odds here is a little bit tricky. I think you can all agree. You never really know who the post time favorite is or the worst post time horse is until the horses actually go off and then the computer corrects itself. You can kind of gauge that a little bit going in, but then a lot of money can change hands in the last second there. In the end, you would get 170% ROI, but that's all because of Rich Strike. You would be waiting 20 plus years for that ROI to kick in. And that whole time, those one single bets you're placing dip down, 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 and then boom. Just last year, you would have experienced the plus ROI. Not exactly the best way to bet. And so horses that didn't make the cut that you might be saying, hey, where's my country house, my mind that bird, my Giacomo. None of those were the least favored post time favorite. So Boat Express, Join the Dance, Closing Argument, they were all lower rated than the three horses that won at large odds in those years. So pushing forward, pushing forward. Um, this is what James was saying. Okay, so doing a little bit of math here. Always bet any post time horse that is currently at 50 to 1 or worse odds. I believe that's what you're saying, James. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I went through this. Boom. You would hit 4 wins in 22 years. So I went back 2001 for all this data. 2000, it was a little bit difficult to get the morning line, so I didn't go back that far. Would have been a loser anyway. But going back to 2001, you'd have 4 winners, each one of them being worth $100 or more. Um, all the ones that you can imagine are going to be in here: your Giacomos, your Country Houses, Rich Strikes, Mind That Bird. Your total spent is going to be 122 because there were 61 horses across 22 years. So you bet $2 each one. Your total winnings 501. Pretty darn sweet. Final ROI is actually going to be 311%. So not the thousands that James was talking about, but I mean, who's going to shake a feather at 311% here? Note that 2 years, 2010, 2011, there were no post-time favorites that were worse than in the 30 to 1 to 40 to 1 range. I think the worst one was 39 to 1 for one of those 2 years. So none of those qualified for this. There's a bunch of zeros in each one of those years, and in each one of those years, I believe the favorites won or something close to the favorites won in those years. So looks like we got a pretty good strategy, at least last 20 years of information. What are our conclusions here? So, betting the morning line favorite year after year proven to be a viable strategy. As I said before, you get a modest ROI of 20%, 7 wins over 23 years, roughly the same period of time. Betting the worst morning line favorite would cost $176 in that period. So that was the first chart that I showed. You would win only 3 times, but the ROI would be 109%. So that's pretty darn good if you can sustain all those years you're losing. That's the problem with some of these strategies. You're really waiting for that, once every 5 years, once every 10 years horse to start, hitting it. If you could figure out the post time least favorite horse, your ROI in a period would be 170%. Your hit rate would be less than 5%. I would even argue it'd be less than that. Um, Expanding this out to any horse that's 50 to 1 or worse covers 3 more wins and sees you hit a 30% ROI, a 300% ROI. Sorry, 300%. So we're talking some pretty good winnings there. If you're willing to sustain the dry years, when you do hit that Rich Strike, you can brag to all your friends. Um, Big money can be had betting the longs if your handicapping is up to par. So, what do you guys think? Are you convinced? Fact or fiction? I don't like the hit rate. I'm a person that does like to hit a little bit more, but I understand finding the value out there. If you go year after year, you hit that big one. Totally get it if that's your fancy. Um, Otherwise, yeah, some of you might call me chalk eater. I like to hit somewhere in between, do a little bit of handicapping, but man, betting those 50 to ones is a little bit scary. Tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me what you like. Tell me if you got any more challenges for me here. We'll look into some of those. And heck, we'll see you guys later.